I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
If you grew up in the 80s, chances are you were witness to two specific things. A massive amount of Vietnam War vets being showcased as heroes or anti-heroes, and lots of aircraft porn. What do I mean by aircraft porn? Chances are by the time this episode is posted, you'll have seen Top Gun Maverick. Back in the 80s, a trend started that would run through the entire decade, and that was a mix of vets, jets, and choppers. Starting with First Blood in 1982 and being helped along by numerous Chuck Norris films, the trend of action heroes after the Vietnam War helped propel a subgenre within Hollywood. It wasn't just the heroes we were there to watch, but the vehicles they were piloting. One of these vehicles would be remembered as one of the most iconic flying machines that graced our TV sets in the 80s, Airwolf. Thanks for taking time to watch Gone But Not Forgotten. If you like our show, please hit subscribe to our channel right now. Hit the like button, and don't forget to click on the bell to be notified each time a video goes up. Now, back to the show. Airwolf streaked across the airwaves in 1984 at the height of America's conflict with Gaddafi. It was a time where the news had become 24/7 and tensions were high with Libya and Russia. I mean, yeah, they are now too, but this was the days of Star Wars, the Reagan version. Airwolf becoming a series was immeasurably helped by the success the year prior of the film Blue Thunder, which is one of the precursors of that wave of aircraft porn flicks I mentioned. Airwolf was created by television mastermind Donald P. Bellisario. Bellisario was the man behind some of the greats of modern TV. He was a co-writer on Battlestar Galactica and created Magnum P.I., Quantum Leap, JAG, and NCIS, to name a few. Bellisario had been in the US Marines back in the 50s, and that experience in the military would come across in a number of these series. Airwolf would typify this with the plot of the series involving the US government, espionage, a fast helicopter, as well as lead characters who were ex-military and had served in Vietnam. Bellisario was originally going to have Airwolf spring from an episode of Magnum P.I., but eventually decided not to go through with it, instead creating a pilot and standalone story for the idea. The pilot, no pun intended, would introduce us rather quickly to the star and namesake of the show. It begins with a demonstration of Airwolf by a CIA special division called The Firm, who has bankrolled the creation of the supercopter for a US senator they want to do business with. Instead, Airwolf's creator and pilot Dr. Moffat, played by David Hemmings, sells out the Firm, seemingly killing everyone at the demonstration and defecting to Libya to work for Gaddafi and his army. It's a quick and brutal turn and not something you normally see on television. Fortunately for the Firm, not everyone was murdered. The dapper and unlucky when it comes to vision deputy director of the Firm, codename Archangel, lives through the massacre, though now he's got a stylish Nick Fury eye patch. To get Airwolf back, he turns to the stoic, broody, and goddamn awesome named Stringfellow Hawke. Stringfellow is the type that will go to a lake in the middle of a beatific forest while bald eagles fly above and play a concerto just because he can. No joke, this is how we're introduced to him. It's so overtly poetic and nature porn that I can't even deal with it. Archangel and his assistant, Gabrielle, arrive with a proposition for Hawke. They want him to work for them to bring back Airwolf, as he's the only other pilot to have flown her. Hawke declines, but after some back and forth, including his massive art collection, he agrees if the Firm will help find his brother, St. John, who has been MIA in Vietnam for years. Gabrielle stays behind to debrief Hawke on the situation. Oh yes, you didn't miss that double meaning. I mean, she spends the first night in the cabin along with her boss in nothing but a blanket. It's odd. There's a whole thing with Gabrielle and Hawke's dog as well. That's equally strange. Gabrielle and Hawke have a very bizarre relationship which seems borderline sadistic. We discover this is a bizarre way Hawke tries to keep Gabrielle from getting too close, as everyone he's ever loved, including girlfriends, tends to die horribly. Eventually, though, Gabrielle gets through the hard exterior of Hawke, even after he calls her a whore, and then there's this whole thing about a fish. Like I said, it's a weird relationship. Hawke wants his old friend, and one of the few people he hasn't lost in his life, Santini, played by Ernest Borgnine, to help him with his plan to get Airwolf. We find Santini as a flight stunt coordinator on a movie set with a spoiled brat of a star. Hawke is helping with the stunts, and the star of the film demands to be let to fly under his own control for a big scene. In one of the more impressive stunts in the pilot, we see this was not a good idea. Hawke finally takes over and safely lands the chopper, while we're left assuming the star is barfing his guts out after the crazy flight. While this is going on, we find out just how psychotic Dr. Moffat really is, as a sweaty and unsettling Moffat reveals his penchant for Russian roulette, as well as penchant for torturing and stalking women. This is shown as he basically asks for a dancer and firm spy as payment for a mission to use Airwolf from the Libyans, which they agree to. Moffat is truly unhinged, and again, this sort of a psychotic is rarely seen on network television. Hemmings really sells it. The first part of the pilot ends with Moffat, while leading a mission with Airwolf to actually blow up an American military ship, much to the dismay of the rest of his team. The second part ramps up quickly as the firm now realizes that Airwolf is being used to attack US targets, as well as other countries, and so Gabrielle is sent off to keep tabs on Moffat, in the same role as the now confirmed dead dancer spy. Hawke is sent out early on his mission after coming home to not Gabrielle cooking him dinner, but finding Archangel eating instead. He's rushed out with a new cover identity and goes to Libya. He quickly finds Gabrielle, who's doing an equally impressive flash dance imitation. Hawke tells her either she gets on a plane back home, or he will, which means no Airwolf. She promises him that she won't die, not like the others, and well, we sort of know that's about the same as telling someone in a horror movie, "I'll be right back." Moffat manages to capture Gabrielle and takes her out to the desert. In an amazingly short span of time, she's covered in blisters and looks like she's been through hell. Moffat has her tied to a jeep while he's dressed like a sheik and baiting her with a canteen of water. Hawke and Santini stroll onto Airwolf in full flight suits with their helmets and visors down. After a very brief firefight, they get on board Airwolf and proceed to blow the living hell out of everything around them. Santini somehow figures out a control setup that looks like it came from Star Trek, complete with dimming lights based on if you're sitting down. One can only imagine how useful this is if you're knocked out of your seat during a firefight or crash. The two go in search of Moffat and Gabrielle, and in the whole of the desert they find Moffat's specific jeep tracks. Moffat sees Airwolf is on its way and deduces that he's pretty much screwed. Santini finds a now abandoned Gabrielle, and the two men hightail it to her side. As was foreshadowed, Gabrielle doesn't make it, and her final words are to Hawke about how she thinks about him and the Eagle all the time. Hawke chokes out a "no" and says,
"She promised me, damn it!
You've made Jan-Michael Vincent cry, sir. You are in deep shit." But before he can take on Moffat, Airwolf goes to take down what appears to be the entire Libyan army in a montage of carnage. Hawke peers out of his helmet and he systematically shoots, explodes, and decimates what looks like the entire country. This is a revenge fantasy on the same level of Rambo, only he's got a high-tech murder chopper to do it with. Airwolf fucks up Libya and survives a rocket attack to rise up out of the sand like a vengeful god. Moffat stands next to his jeep while Hawke glares at him. It's a strange scene yet again, and one that seems to be trying to evoke an old-school gunslinger fight with two very unevenly matched outlaws. Moffat aims his trusty pistol at the helicopter, and Hawke proceeds to unleash hell and blows the living crap out of him. Oddly, this scene made me think of Frankenstein. but more along the lines of the Doctor becoming the monster and the monster becoming the karmic retribution he deserves. Hawke keeps clicking the trigger on the chopper until Santini finally gets through to him that it's over. Airwolf flies away, leaving a lot of dead people and wreckage behind, and possibly a big old war. Back at the Casa Hawke, we find Archangel waiting. The firm knows that Hawke has hidden Airwolf somewhere, but Stringfellow says he's wired it to explode if he doesn't make a phone call once a day. So, Archangel makes yet another deal with him. Because of the situation, he knows that multiple agencies will be going after Hawke to get Airwolf back. So instead, the firm will supply Hawke with the money and resources he needs to do missions, as well as continue the search for his lost brother if he works for them. Hawke agrees to this. The pilot ends with Stringfellow Hawke crying over his lost lady while playing his cello on the lake. We then see a bald eagle swoop down, and the sight makes the broken-hearted Hawke smile. Let your manly tears fall, Stringfellow, as your soul soars. Airwolf got away with a lot for network television just in the pilot alone. It wasn't shy about the violence or the darker storylines it had going on. All these years later, it stuck with me. David Hemmings as Moffat was a straight-up psychotic who openly talked about getting his jollies from murdering women. He just oozed unease and reminded me a lot of Joe Spinell in Maniac with his sweaty delivery, nerves, and he gave great creepy eye. Hemmings was known by many for his film work, notably starring in Deep Red by Dario Argento in 1975. One of my favorites was his turn in the vampire film Thirst. He would wind up doing a lot of TV work, including quite a bit on American TV like Magnum P.I. and Tales from the Crypt, before passing away in 2003 from a sudden heart attack. Jan-Michael Vincent was a great choice for the series. Vincent had a long TV and film record already when he was brought on as Stringfellow. He had been in feature films like Going Home with Robert Mitchum and the lead role in the cult classic Damnation Alley opposite George Peppard. Vincent brought that tragic hero vibe perfectly to the screen. Sadly, it would become obvious over the following years that the tortured side of the character would be true to life. During filming, Vincent's problems with drugs and alcohol were already evident, and Airwolf would be one of the last major lead roles he would have in his career. During the filming of the first and second seasons of the series, he'd been arrested for fighting at a bar twice. As time went on, Vincent would be involved in many auto accidents, assaults, heavy drinking, and drug use. This would eventually lead to him having numerous health issues, injuries, arrests, and his health would eventually cost him a leg and irreparably change his voice. Jan-Michael Vincent would pass away in 2019 at the age of 74. Vincent had a photographic memory, something that was damn impressive to co-star Ernest Borgnine. Borgnine was a legendary actor who had also served in the Navy for a good part of his life before becoming an actor full-time. He'd become well known firstly for the feature film Marty, which would win a number of awards in 1955, including one for Best Actor at the Oscars. He'd go on to success in TV with the classic series McHale's Navy, for which he'd be nominated for an Emmy. Before coming on board Airwolf, Borgnine's career went in an interesting direction in the realms of cult films like The Devil's Reign, Deadly Blessing, and Escape from New York, where a whole new generation of fans would discover him. Borgnine was a fantastic actor and could go from lovable to sinister with just a glance. And no one will ever forget his turn in Basketball. Ernest Borgnine passed away in 2012 at the age of 92. The Man in White, aka Archangel, was played by actor Alex Cord. Cord was another veteran actor who had worked in films like the classic western Stagecoach and numerous TV series. After Airwolf, he would continue doing a lot of TV and syndicated series work, including Freddy's Nightmares and Walker, Texas Ranger. Alex Cord passed away in 2021 at the age of 88. Airwolf was an expensive show for CBS to produce back in the 80s, at around $1.2 million an episode. Viewers would quickly notice that a lot of the shots of the chopper itself would be reused footage, with a number of shots that were from stock footage of explosions and weapons. The first season focused on espionage and way darker material than other series that would be airing around the same time. The A-Team, for example, would usually have a healthy dose of comic relief within the story. Airwolf followed Magnum P.I. in that. You'd have moments of levity, but there's some heavy stuff going on behind the eyes of your lead character. The first season would deal with Russia, Nazis, and Stringfellow's time in Vietnam. It would also feature some familiar faces as guest stars like Shannon Doherty, David Carradine, and the gravelly voiced actor Lance LeGault. LeGault would actually play the bad guy in the final episode of Season 1, and returned to be a different bad guy in first episode of Season 2, this time with a mustache. Completely different guy, don't you see? When Season 2 came up though, CBS wasn't happy with the results they were getting with ratings. While fans who watched the show loved the dynamic of Hawke and Santini and the grittier stories, CBS decided that a change was needed. Where the main cast had been all male leads, it was decided that a main female lead would possibly help get more viewers. Enter Jean Bruce Scott as Caitlin O'Shaughnessy. Caitlin is introduced in first episode of second season as a chopper pilot who helps the crew out during their mission. She quits her job for the highway patrol and eventually becomes a full-fledged crew member for Airwolf. Along with the addition of a female lead, CBS decided that the storylines needed to be more action-driven. The network interference was enough that Belisario quit the series. Producer-director Bernard Kowalski took over from him. Kowalski had a resume that included a lot of TV hits, such as Jake and the Fat Man, Columbo, and many more. But I'll always be grateful for his contribution to the land of motion pictures with the classic film Tss. Sadly though, this shakeup of this formula and behind-the-scenes direction possibly hurt the series more than anything else. After one more season, Airwolf as we knew it was cancelled by CBS in 1986. But there's nothing like money as a motivation for renewal, so in 1987, CBS handed the controls of the chopper over to the USA Network. This was a move to allow for enough episodes of the series to be created to allow for syndication. A fourth season of Airwolf would take to the skies with literally none of the original cast. Although Jan-Michael Vincent did appear in the first episode briefly, Santini, on the other hand, would actually be blown up using a body double in the first episode. The new season brought out St. John, Stringfellow's brother, as the lead as played by Barry Van Dyke, and would move production to Canada. Airwolf's new crew would consist of Dom's niece, Joe Santini, played by Michelle Scarabelli, Mike Rivers, played by Garrett Wynne Davies, and Jason Locke, played by Anthony Sherwood. Archangel was replaced by Newman, the new person in charge, and was played by the cigarette-smoking man himself, William B. Davis. The firm was out of the picture, as was the ever-white-wearing Archangel. Instead, the company was now in charge. St. John's appearance is explained away as he was being held prisoner and was actually known to have been working undercover this whole time. Stringfellow is left in the hospital by the same explosion that killed Santini, and we never see Jan-Michael Vincent in the role again. The fourth season of Airwolf was a pretty big departure for the series, as you can see. But one of the major ones was the budget, which was obvious to anyone watching. The per episode cost went from around over $1 million per episode to $300,000. Leftover footage from the first 3 seasons was reused, along with that stockpile of stock footage. The series couldn't afford to use the actual helicopter due to budget cuts, so for scenes in the cockpit, they used pieces of the original set and reused scenes already shot. This reboot of Airwolf lasted 1 season, but did what it was created to do, which was add to the episode count for syndication purposes. I personally find it interesting that a few years later, Forever Knight would actually have something similar occur when it would go from CBS to syndication, and then eventually wind up on the USA Network as well. Strangely, digging through some of the stories about this series, I almost believe there was a curse on it. We've already talked about Jan-Michael Vincent's tragic life, but during production, Vincent's stunt double Reed Rondell died during filming in 1985. Then there's the helicopter itself. The Bell 222, which was Airwolf, was a very real helicopter. After the series, it was actually sold to be used as an air ambulance. While being flown in 1992, the chopper crashed with no survivors. While that's absolutely tragic, I like the idea that Airwolf herself was being used to help people and save lives after the camera stopped rolling. So there's some light there at least. Fans of the series loved it and still do, and honestly there's a lot to love. Besides the fact that Airwolf was one of the coolest helicopters ever, in the 80s it was like having a new action movie every week. The whooshing sound of Airwolf as it glided through the air, reminiscent of a Cylon from Battlestar Galactica, was simply badass, and so was the music. Airwolf's theme is probably the first thing you think of when someone mentions the show. It was composed by Grammy winner Sylvester LeVay. LeVay's career is extensive, as he worked with many famous people from Elton John to Sylvester Stallone and composed soundtracks for movies like Cobra, Hot Shots, as well as being the arranger on Scarface and Flashdance. Airwolf had a number of computer games released based on the series. Acclaim also released an Airwolf game for the NES. Fans keep the series alive, making working Airwolf helmets as well as t-shirts and patches of the crew logo. So here we are with the question that we need to answer. Should Airwolf come back? I think it could be done, and done well today with the technology available, but I don't know if the charm of what made the original great could ever be replicated. While it was obviously overly dramatic, and you had to believe an entire covert government agency would have everyone within it dressed in white, that was the charm. The brooding anti-hero and his wisecracking buddy flying a helicopter that had boosters and defied physics was what made it work. It wasn't jaded and bitter, which is an odd thing to say when you were dealing with a character like Stringfellow Hawke. If it could be done, my money would be on a guy like Joe Carnahan, who has already brought back a fantastic redo of a classic 80s series with his A-Team movie in 2010. That's the way you remake an 80s classic action series and keep the heart of it intact. So yes, I could totally see Airwolf flying back into the horizon. We just need to figure out who has the steely gaze to fly it. If you're interested in watching the show, strap on your helmet and go to the Peacock streaming service. Just be sure to keep an eye out for some bald eagles.